Alrighty. Well, again, welcome everyone, and we'll get started. Vanessa.
Hello. What a wonderful introduction there that y'all have. I am Vanessa, everyone. I am a splitter here at Stanford Med. So I'm technically in my third year, but second half of second year. And a little background, I was born and raised in Sonoma County, and I attended community college, then transferred to UC Berkeley, and I majored in nutrition. It was specifically, they had three tracks there, which is super cool. They have dietetics, they have a nutrition track where you can go into toxicology, and another one where you can go into nutrition, physiology and metabolism, which is what I did. And uh, so I graduated and took about 3 years of gap years, as they say, and I did public health research and then ended up here at Stanford Med. I was also debating between UCSF's JMP program, which is also excellent for doing a master's and doing extra research if you're interested in that, since here at Stanford Med, they are pretty research heavy. Um, and that's just kind of a big overview of my path, but and you can ask more questions and go into more detail later, but let's get maybe Margarita next.
Hi everyone. My name is Margarita. I am a third year at Stanford as well. I was born in Colombia, and I came to the US when I was 6. And then I spent the majority of my life in Miami, um, or at least I grew up there. And then I went to college at U Chicago, worked as a kind of bootleg social worker, I call it. Because you needed like a master's degree to be a social worker, but I was doing basically the work that a social worker does without having that master's, in a low-income neighborhood in Chicago. Um, and I was doing my MPH as well at Northwestern. Um, what else? The fun fact about myself, that was one thing, right? Um, I am a proud cat mother. My child's name is Antonio, but I call him Tony unless I'm mad at him, then I call him Antonio. Um, and you will probably see him walking around somewhere around here. Let's go to Katia.
Thanks, Margarita, and hi everyone. I'm Katia or Katia Vera. I'm originally from Guadalajara, Mexico, but I grew up in Central Valley of California, which, for those of you who don't know, is like a very rural, kind of underserved area of California. Um, and I really enjoyed growing up there, but like I said, there was just a lack of resources, and that kind of turned me on to medicine since there was not a lot, there was a shortage of physicians. So I attended Princeton University for undergrad, where I majored in anthropology. So if anyone has any questions about doing like a non-traditional major, I'd love to answer those. I did a minor in global health and health policy and also Latin American studies. And then I actually only did half of my pre-med requirements at Princeton. There was just a lot of weed out classes, so I'm also happy to answer questions about that. Um, and then finished my pre-med classes at LMU doing a post-bac. Retook the other pre-med classes that I had already started, and then did a post-bac at Stanford actually, but a research post-bac. So if you have questions about post-bacs, also happy to answer those. Um, and then Stanford was my number one, so I'm really, really happy to be here. It's close to my family. It's an amazing research institution, amazing weather. I guess a fun fact about me is I've had 25 roommates in the last 8 years because I've moved around so much with school and different internships and my postbacks. So if you have also questions about roommates, but yeah, happy to be here. I'm passing it to Lexi.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Katya. My name is Lexi. I'm a first year medical student at Stanford. I was born and raised in Sonoma, California as well, and went to the Santa Rosa Junior College, where I got a bunch of associate's degrees because I had no idea what I wanted to do, and was interested in a lot of different domains in my education. But I ended up transferring with pre-med intentions to Stanford University. And I graduated there with a BS in human biology, which is it's kind of like a major that's you kind of make your own major. So my concentration was neurobiology, behavior, and health. And then I took a year off to just focus on research work and applied to medical school. And yeah, happy to talk about any of those things. I have been trying to think of my fun fact and am having trouble. I love hula hooping, which I feel like is a random um, kind of hobby. So yeah, thank you.
All right. So, like, I guess the first question to each of you is, why did you chose the whole why question, the why medicine question? Um, why medicine?
Yeah, I can go first. There are two main reasons. One major one, or I guess there's three. One will be, I'll start off with like the least important of those three for me, which is, but obviously important. In going through all the courses, I also got to explore a lot in community college. I got into robotics and helped start the robotics team at the junior college. And then I also was interested in public health and all these things. And in all of that, what drew me most was I took an anatomy class and I was like, I have to take this again. I took it at a community college. We got to do dissections there, and I was like, this cannot be enough. This is not it. I need to do this again. And I just love the material of learning about the human body um, and clearly also just doing internships. So this the science behind of it is something I like to learn. Second, I am Latina. There are not many Latinas in medicine, so it is a huge privilege to be able to be on this path and to go and become a doctor to me is just a way of representing and taking advantage of this huge privilege that I have. And third, grew up and still low income, first gen. And with all of that, my parents were uninsured. We relied on a community free clinic and the emergency department. And so, because of that, I want to be a part of that just ability of increasing access. And you hear this so often, but it does impact, if you've gone through that experience, it impacts you so much. And for me, it impacted me so much that I'm on this route, third year of med school. And these are my three reasons.
I can go next. Oh boy. So I kind of similar to Vanessa. I grew up low income. I was undocumented for the majority of my life, and I was also living in Florida. So if we have any Florida people, y'all know that being undocumented in Florida ain't it. Um, it was pretty rough. And my mom went through a lot of different like health problems and a lot of people in my family. Um, I when we first got to the US, we were living in this like shelter-ish thing with a lot of other women and family and children. And I just saw a lot of um, like I saw the outcomes of a lot of trauma built up, lots of mental health problems. And overall, I just saw like how unfair everything was. I just saw how unfair the system was. And that kind of motivated me to go into fighting for my community. So all through high school, I was very involved in community organizing. And when I applied to college and my like first year or so of college, I was actually a political science major. And I wanted to be like a lawyer or like something or like work in public policy or something along those lines. Um, but also when I got to U Chicago, I had no idea what I was doing. So I just kind of like tagged along with whatever my roommate was doing. Because her mom is a professor at Berkeley, so like she seemed to have it figured out. So I was like, I'm just gonna do whatever she does. And she was a bio major, so I ended up taking bio classes, and I was just like, hold up, do I like this? I was shook because I had never really considered a career in something STEMmy. Um, but then after that, I started volunteering as a medical Spanish interpreter at a community clinic. And I did that mostly because in in Chicago, like Miami is literally just northern Latin America. So living in Chicago, I was like, whoa, like this, it was a huge culture shock for me. So I wanted to be around Latinos. So that's why I started this interpreting position. And I just realized that I actually really liked it. So realizing that I liked science and that I liked this like the clinical aspect of it, I was like, ooh, this could be something. But I also wanted to still explore the other things that I was interested in, which is why I worked as like again a bootleg social worker and also why I did my MPH because I knew I wanted to help people in the healthcare field, but that can take on so many forms. Um, and through process of elimination, I finally was like, okay, yeah, like this is what I want to do.
Wait, and Margarita, you mentioned like you explored so many things, you got the MPH, and I just wanted to highlight you can have multiple careers. We have a first year med student. She is a lawyer, worked as a lawyer, and is now in med school. And I'm also interested in public policy and Margarita already has a master's in public health. I might take a year out to do public policy too. And this is just all part of your life journey. So um, take it easy, explore, and um, you make use of your resources. We're here for you.
Does your classmate give free legal advice to all the classmates?
I don't
Yeah,
know. I just met her, but she was amazing. I'll definitely have to ask her
free
for,
legal advice.
for legal advice whenever I need some. I don't think I need it now.
Yeah. They with a curbside consulting. Sorry. Go ahead, Katya.
No, I know this student. She's awesome. She's also a model, so I'm sure she'll give modeling tips as well, besides law advice.
No, 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 no. Well, for some of us will not be helpful one bit. So
But yeah, I guess I'll go next in answering the question why I chose medicine. I think similar to Margarita and Vanessa, um, I've always had a lot of interests. I think since I can remember, the earliest like identity that I had, besides being Latina, was being a nerd. Like I just really, really loved to learn. I loved science as a kid. I loved astronomy. I asked for a microscope when I was like 5 years old. I just really, really liked to learn and to understand science. And I think as I got older and you start to develop more interest in different things, at least for me, like that maybe subsided a little bit, that interest in science. But then I realized when I looked back on my journey that that was really helpful as I progressed in my pre-med journey because that like love for discovery and love for just learning, that's really helpful for someone who's going to become a doctor because even once you have the MD, even once you're practicing with patients, you're still going to be learning stuff all the time. And so I think just loving learning was one of the reasons I really uh liked the idea of learning medicine. And then more on like the personal side of it, as Vanessa mentioned, there's not many Latina physicians. I think in the country, there's about 6% that identify as Latino, Latinx. And I think about 2 or 3% identify as Latina. And in California, we're in a state that's 40% Hispanic. Where I grew up specifically was 60% Hispanic, most of them being Mexican immigrants. Like I mentioned, I was born in Mexico, but I grew up here. So I spoke Spanish. I mean, sorry, I spoke English. Understood kind of how to navigate things, especially going um, to school here, going to a very, I guess, prestigious university. I felt like my family members, especially my grandmother, who didn't speak English, um, just came from a culture where she wanted to see a Latina physician specifically, someone who was a woman, someone who understood her culture, someone who spoke her language, her native language was really important. And we had a really difficult time finding her that doctor in the Central Valley. We finally did, but it was very hard. And so I think seeing that problem within my own family and seeing how my grandmother sort of had mistrust for the healthcare field because of her past abuse. My grandmother had been pregnant in the United States in 1970s, sorry, and suffered a miscarriage because they just didn't take her seriously, didn't take her pain seriously as a Latina woman. And then later doing research as like I mentioned, doing my anthropology major, I did a lot of medical anthropological research. And so I was looking at all of these like social determinants of health, past medical abuse in the United States on oppressed communities, specifically, people of color, women of color, low-income communities. And I realized that like the things that my grandmother had gone through were the same things that I was researching and part of the reason that my grandmother had suffered a miscarriage, and just been medically gaslit and had so much distrust and really wanted to find someone from her culture and spoke her language. And that really hit home for me because I realized that these are not just like things you're reading about in a textbook. And they're also not just from the past, they're still happening. Even recently, I met a woman who grew up here in Oakland. She's Mexican American and she went back to Mexico to have her baby just because she was so distrustful of the American healthcare system and the physicians here. Um, so I think the past sort of informing me that this is still very much systemic, it's still going on. And then also my love for learning is kind of what has led me to become a doctor and hopefully make it a little bit more equitable.
Last but not least, Lexi.
Thank you. Um, so similar to a lot of the other stories, I also grew up low income and I'm Native American, Coast Miwok and Southern Pomo, which are California Indian tribes. Um, and because of that, and we were not insured. I used the Sonoma County Indian Health Project growing up, which is a community health clinic that serves Native peoples. And that was a lifeline for our family. And although it was helpful, I didn't see physicians who looked like me there. And that was just something that I picked up on early in life. So representation really matters. There are still not enough Native physicians, and looking at the trend lines in terms of like admissions, that's still going to be the case for a long time. So that's something that was really important to me as well. Um, I did not grow up like as a nerd or like academics was not part of my identity in elementary through high school. But once I found my niche in community college, I like became a nerd, I guess. But something that was really great about my parents was although they didn't get their high school diploma, they dropped out, I think in their sophomore years of high school. They really encouraged learning. Like maybe because they didn't know the answers to the questions that I was asking often, but they were like, well, what do you think? And so I think that's something that's really important to was important to my story is just like being comfortable trying to make inferences on the natural world. And yeah, I like to think honestly of like my why medicine statement is like I'm almost on a ladder or something, and I'm tapping the people that are on top of the ladder's shoulder, being like, do better, and then extending a helping hand to the people who are still climbing. And that's just something that I try to remind myself all the time. But also for this question, I think it's really helpful to think why not anything else? Like not just why medicine, but why not like any other career, especially if you've had other avenues that you've explored, because medicine going into medicine is a huge sacrifice. And it's a long haul, as you all know. So really think like why not any other avenue in terms of a career, and what makes medicine unique to me, and makes me suited to explore.
The other question is, what resources does your school give to low-income students?
I can go. What resources does Stanford give to low-income students? Well, um, one of the pros of going to a school with like a big endowment, aka a rich school, is that most of the time I can only speak to myself, but for my year, um, they were very generous in terms of financial aid. Like I have everything paid for, um, guaranteed for 6 years. Yes, six, because at Stanford, people take 6 years instead of 4 years, or sometimes they take 4 years, but a lot of people end up taking 5 or 6. Um, so they just factor that in already. And then they also give me a stipend every quarter, pay for housing and all that. So for me, that was a big thing because your girl ain't got money. And my family doesn't have money either. So I needed I needed something that would somewhere that would pay for all of these things. So I think that's like one of the biggest things that Stanford does is like give you money to survive. That's pretty important. But in addition to that, I think they have like other funds that you can apply to. There's a lot of like free like resources that they pay for us. Um, yeah. I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything.
I'll just second what you said. I also get all funded, which was a major reason why I ended up choosing Stanford. And they a lot of other students who are going to apply to residency programs that require more of the research, they have to look for third-party resources and funding to be able to take a year out for research or do some, any type of research. And so here at Stanford, we do get more of a guarantee with that funding, especially during summers if you want to do research or a full year out. They do provide that, and you have that here.
I'll just add that for those applying this cycle or in the future, I think Margarita and Vanessa um, were really lucky that they got here earlier because there was a lot more funding with like a very generous gift that someone had given the school. And so I'm very glad that they were able to get help. I will say from my class, even some of the reasons why my class is I think maybe a little bit more privileged financially than the previous classes was because there was a lack of, I guess, scholarships given to a lot of my classmates. So, for reference, I'm on full financial aid covering my tuition, but for housing and for food, I do have to take out a loan for that. Whereas I believe if I had applied earlier, gotten in earlier, I would probably be on full everything. So it was difficult for me coming from a background where at Princeton I was on full financial aid. I think I had to pay very, very little, and I graduated without debt. And I hope that in the future Stanford will be able to offer the financial aid that they once did just a year ago, because I think that will also increase the diversity of our class with, more low-income students, more students of color who are typically from or sometimes from those backgrounds. And I feel like my year got hit hard with like affirmative action not being a thing anymore, and then also the gift that was previously given and ran out. That last year was the last year. So I just wanted to add that I think we're seeing like a big discrepancy between me and Lexi's year and Margarita and Vanessa. But I am hopeful that it will happen again. And then I think there are other small things that I've noticed that I think Stanford has done well, which is like, for example, offering to rent like iPads and computers for students if you're not able to buy one. So that's just something like small that I've noticed. But I do think Stanford is able to subsidize a lot of things that I really appreciate. But I did want to make a note. It just kind of depends on per year.
Yeah, I just want to echo everything Katya just said. Our year is unique. And from my understanding, they just stopped using the gift our year. Like it's going to continue again at some point. Um, who knows when? We were all kind of shocked by it. Yeah. So that's frustrating, and I totally agree with like the outcomes of that that Katya noted. In undergrad, I was fully funded at Stanford. Like they had, great financial aid for me in undergrad. But medical school, it's a slightly different story. Same as Katya, I have my tuition paid for, but everything else, which is a very large expense, especially like in Palo Alto. It's not cheap to live there. So something to keep in mind. But yeah, happy to answer more questions about that, especially in undergrad if anyone has any. There's a bunch of great like things you can apply for money. Grants, there's like an emergency grant that if you get hit with a crazy bill for, I don't know, medical expenses or something happens, like you can get $10,000 through the emergency grant fund, I believe it's called. Um, so there's different options, but it's definitely not ideal our year in terms of financials.
Lexi, this question's actually for you. They're asking, what was your experience transferring from community college to Stanford? All of your courses from community college transferred to Stanford, and how many credits did you receive from transferring?
Yeah, great question. So my experience like on a global level was just that like going from the semester system, which I was on in my community college, to the quarter system is like the biggest difference in terms of like lifestyle and academics. And I've heard that, across the board for people who transferred to like UCs that are on the quarter system as well. It's a lot faster, which has its benefits and drawbacks. Like one benefit is that you can't really get behind because you're having like exams every week, at least every 2 weeks on the quarter system. So in some ways it's nice. And if you don't like a class, it's done in 10 weeks, which is also nice. So that was a big difference. And I think it takes people a while to get used to. So my biggest recommendation is honestly, if you're transferring anywhere, but especially if you're going from a semester to a quarter system, like take it very easy. It's the first quarter. Do not load yourself up with the difficult classes and, get 20 units. Like don't put yourself through that. Take it easy and see what like you can handle first. Um, in terms of like the actual credit transfers, because Stanford is a private university, it's not like as easy as the UC one-to-one kind of like course transferring. So that was kind of a long process. Basically, what I had to do was collect all my syllabi from like every class that I took, which I was in community college for years, so it was a lot. I recommend like saving them just in a file if you're planning on transferring anywhere, um, and submit it to the transfer team. And then they basically went through it like with a fine-tooth comb and decided whether or not it counted towards an undergrad class equivalent. But I did max out on that. So I think I got, I don't know, it was like 90 units or something. Again, I was in community college for so long, like 4 years, I think. So I had a lot of classes. But it worked out okay. Yeah, was there another part to that question? I'm sorry.
No, I think that was just it. And how did you like the process going from community college? So, kind of making a plug for next week, we have the Dean of Undergraduate Admission at Stanford, Dr. Dean Shaw, and also the Director of Transfer Advising at Stanford is going to be on here next Friday. So, there's a lot of questions about transferring. So, but there. And I think that was just that is people just want to know how did you go from community college to Stanford.
Yeah. I will say my community college classes were like, I mean, the Santa Rosa Junior College is really STEM heavy. It's supposed to be a sister school with like Berkeley, so we use the same curriculum in some of the STEM courses. And the actual difficulty of the classes was like not any different, I felt. It was just the timing, like the, cadence of them where the quarter system moves faster. Yeah. Thank you.
Um, this is a question. If you taken your classes at a community college, your prereqs at a community college, did it impact your medical school application? And also, how did that impact you at all, or was there ever a question or doubt? I would just say that obviously it wasn't because, 2 out of 4 here went to a community college. So but I'll just throw that out there that you all answer that. And then also the other questions about post-bac as well. And obviously, so let you all answer that.
As Lexi said, we both went to the same community college, and also found the courses to be even more challenging than my courses at UC Berkeley. I also got accepted to Cornell. So, I don't think there's anything that it would have put me at a really great also private school and then probably the same track to get into a really good med school. I don't think there is anything that that really jeopardized my application because I took courses or those pre-med prereqs at a community college. They really prepared me, at least at our community college, for transferring and doing well. I did have a high GPA personally, and I kept pretty much straight A's at community college. So that was personally, I don't know if the GPA there was probably really helpful too.
Yeah, echoing what Vanessa said, like I think I was worried I definitely had a lot of doubt, like, oh, am I going to be looked like down upon because I took a bunch of pre-med courses at community college. But honestly, I feel like I learned more because I took some pre-med courses at Stanford, and I really do feel like I learned more at community college, actually. Um, and I just had like great professors who were awesome. But yeah, I don't think that it matters. Like, no matter where you start off and where you like go, it is what you make it, right? So, um, you know, who you'll bloom wherever you're planted. And yeah, I don't think it impacted. I think it actually benefited me in the long run because I have like a different perspective than a lot of people who took a traditional track.
And then what about Katya doing post-bac?
Yeah, sorry. Are there specific questions about postbac, like specific ones, or should I just talk about it in general?
Yeah, just talking about in general, why did you chose doing a formal versus, informal?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it really depends on the person. Um, my kind of reasons for doing a formal postbac when I took my pre-med classes was because I wanted the committee letter. I knew that I wouldn't be able to get a committee letter from Princeton because I hadn't taken enough of their pre-med requirements, so their pre-med office would not be able to submit a letter on my behalf. And for those of you who don't know, a committee letter is usually from your undergrad or your post-bac program, basically kind of like vouching for you. It's an additional letter of rec. Just kind of talking about who you are and that you did do well at their school. And so for me, that letter was important. I don't know if it ended up making a difference, but I liked that LMU, Legal and Marymount had a pre-med office that I could go to when I had questions. And they were also going to write me that letter and kind of coordinate with the other letter writers. And they ended up being pretty useful when I did have questions when I was applying. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to do a formal post-bac. I thought that it would also be taken a little bit more seriously to be part of a formal program, but I can't compare because I didn't do an informal one, so I don't know if that is true. But I think that was my thought process at the time when I was applying to postbacks. I also really wanted to be in California because I had been in New Jersey for the last 4 years. So I would just kind of, I was like just narrowing it down. I was just like, what programs are formal? What programs are in California? Um, and where can I do like a career changer, having already taken some of those classes? I think I had already taken general chemistry and some bio. I had like dropped organic chemistry. And I mention all these things just because I want students to know that if you don't do well in a class, you can retake it. If you drop a class, take it again, try to do different study methods. I came from a really rural community, like I mentioned, and I had always done pretty well in school. So I think for me, I didn't have those like solid study strategies. And then going to a super rigorous undergrad where it was based on a curve. So you were competing with each other. And a lot of my peers had gone to boarding schools where their coursework was very similar to Princeton. It was a huge like academic culture shock. And I did not do well in my pre-med classes. And I also didn't know I had a reading disability until I was in my post-bac. So that was crazy. I didn't know I needed extra time. So I think trying to narrow it down to what your like musts are. For me, I wanted that committee letter. I wanted to be in California and I wanted to be able to retake all of my pre-med classes. So I think that's kind of how I tell pre-med students to narrow it down. Like, um, what do you need out of a post-bac program? But I've seen people here at Stanford that did a DIY post-bac and they're here and they're doing just fine. So I think as long as you kind of get what you need to out of that program, it doesn't really matter what you do. As long as you have a good GPA, you have good letter writers, or sorry, good letters of rec, um, stuff like that. I think just like knowing what you need to get out of the post-bac. And then I did do the research post-bac. I don't know if I should talk about that or
Sure,
we should
talk
just keep
about it.
it
Yeah.
at that. Okay, so I'm not being sponsored by Reach, but I always talk about it. So I feel like they should start paying me.
I think you
So
should. I
Reach
think you
stand,
should definitely ask him.
I think I need to get on their payroll. So REACH stands for Racial Equity to Advance a Community of Health. And it is just a new initiative at Stanford, but it I think started maybe 2020 is when they first started rolling out the initiative. And there's about 6 programs under the initiative, one of them being the postbac. So I think at Stanford and at a lot of higher institutions, there is a lack of students from diverse backgrounds, whatever that means, first gen, low income, students of color. And so Reach is kind of created to help improve that, and specifically with students entering medical school. So the Reach postbac, I think they choose 20 students per year to do research at Stanford. And what I really liked about it is I'm interested in dermatology, which as someone who's not in medical school or isn't already a physician, it's really hard to get into the dermatology research world, especially being first gen. I had no connections in the research world, and I didn't know any dermatologists that had labs. So um, when I came into Reach, I was like, I want to work with a derm lab. And I was able to connect with one. And what I really like about Reach is they're paying you to do the research because you are working. So for my pre-med post-bac, I was taking classes, right? I had to pay for the classes, but with the Reach postbac, it is a job. So you are making money. That's how I was able to pay for applying to medical school and stuff like that. So I did work for 2 years doing the Reach postbac. And I think the biggest thing that I got from Reach, besides like the research aspect, being able to put that on my application, being able to get a publication, which a lot of schools like Stanford, you need to do research to be looked at, was just the connections. I was able to find a lot of mentors, including Vanessa and Margarita, that, answered my questions, were able to look over my application before I hit submit. And when I was in the process, helped me like practice interviewing, or like, how do I send an update letter? How do I send a letter of interest? Stuff like that, that it just gave me mentors in the research world, mentors who are, similar to me, and just people at Stanford. Like when I applied, I was like, hey, I'm applying to Stanford. I really want to go here. And I think just having those connections, unfortunately, they are super, super crucial. So I think like I wouldn't have had such a like amazing opportunity of getting into Stanford if I hadn't done Reach and I hadn't like shown that I was already here. So I think if you're interested in a school, doing research there is really, really important.
This is another question that's coming up asking about how do you guys find research opportunities at community college and undergraduate? And then also postbac, and then also uh, did you do, how did you fund your research? Did you have to pay out of pocket, or were you getting support?
Before we go into that, I know Katya mentioned a committee letter, or yeah, that's what it's called. I did not have one. Just wanted to say that UC Berkeley did not offer one. I think it's from the school, so I didn't have one. I applied to med schools without committee letters. So just wanted to add that.
Same.
I think committee letters are more of an Eastern school Ivy League thing, but I could be wrong. I don't know. Margarita, you went to an Ivy League. Did they do committee letters?
They did, yeah.
Can you just repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Oh, they wanted to know, how did you find research opportunities when you were in community college, undergraduate, and postbacs, and then did you get paid for them for your research? And how did you find them, and what kind of research they were?
I'll start. So I was fortunate that at community college, again, Santa Rosa Junior College, I would go to office hours with to my bio teacher and chem teacher, and so my bio teacher actually came to me and told me about an opportunity and how they would introduce me to someone at a research that was about like a 45-minute drive away in Napa, the aging. Um, it was aging research. And so I got lucky that I was able to start that, I think, like my second year and do that for 2 years. And then she also told me about another research opportunity where I applied to, and that was at with UCSF's Gladstone's Institute. And I did research there the summer before um, transferring to Berkeley. at Berkeley, there's like I think it's called SURF. Um, there's research opportunities once you like immediately once you start, there's an application that goes out. I applied and did research for maybe that first semester. I didn't like what I did research in, which is also important to know if you don't like a certain type of research. This was more of math and CS. And that was not my thing. So I actually didn't do any more research after that during the following 2 years at UC Berkeley. And then I wanted to maybe try public health research since I mentioned earlier I was interested in public health and I got applied to a whole bunch of random positions. Even though I didn't have public health research experience, I got into a lab with a PI here at Stanford, and I did that during my gap years before applying to medical schools. And okay, one thing I did want to add is I have learned about like opinion pieces and systematic reviews and scoping reviews, which are sort of more doable research um, things that y'all can do. So if you look up scoping or systematic reviews and you can come up with a topic and reach out to a PI at your school or at a university and tell them, this is my idea. I could do a systematic review or a scoping review on this. They hopefully will say yes, and you can go about and do that. And also opinion pieces or viewpoints, which are not exactly research, but they also count, and you could also get published that way. So, and I know my PI is huge on those here at Stanford Med. In terms of payment, I was not paid while I was at during community college doing aging research. I was paid for the summer internship at Gladstone Institutes, and I was in a full-time research position during my gap years.
Similar to Vanessa at the Santa Rosa Junior College, like research is yeah, my bio professors were the ones who kind of recommended me for certain positions. And I also went to the Buck Institute, which is for research on aging. That's kind of like the one research institution nearby. I didn't love the research there, to be honest, either. Like that was one point in time where I felt like a lot of doubt that I didn't belong there. I was an imposter. Um, but I think it was really helpful. I was lucky to be elected to go into a certain lab, which was like just starting. So I really saw like the way that labs start and like the research process gets going, which was helpful. And I was actually paid, I believe, during my year in California. I don't know if this is a county-wide thing or a statewide thing, but they passed a bill that had something to do with not being able to have like free labor, essentially. So they paid me like small stipends, but that was helpful since it was like a long drive away. Um, and in terms of an undergrad, I, kind of similar things, like almost all of my my research labs that I've worked in have been just like, oh, I take a professor's class and you know, ask them about their research and get involved in some way. So I would say like a big tip is to just not be afraid to ask and to like get involved. And I think what Vanessa said about systematic reviews or scoping reviews, opinion pieces, like those are great skills to have. And they're very doable, like on your own. You can find papers that tell you exactly how to do a systematic review. So I think that's a great point, and something that would also be helpful just to like, even if you don't get a publication out of it in time for your application, um, it's a really helpful skill to have. So recommend that for sure.
I was just going to add that I think because I wasn't like a science major, my professors weren't doing like medical research. So that was a little bit more difficult for me. Um, but I was very lucky that I had to do a thesis as part of my major. And then as part of my minor, we had to do like a little research project in one summer. But I think what I did, because anthropology, you can do anything, is I would always try to connect it back to medicine. Like I was like, if somebody was reading my application, um, how is this like connecting back to why I want to be a doctor? How is this relevant? And I wouldn't say like do that for everything, because obviously you want to have things on your application that are showing your personality and showing your interests. And these were things that I was very interested in. But for example, like we had to write a junior paper, which was a literature review, and I was anthro, right? So I was really interested in the Mexican Revolution. And that is like a very obscure topic. But just to show that like I always connected it back, was I was showing how the Mexican Revolution impacted like social determinants of health in Mexico. Which is like a topic that hadn't been previously looked at. A lot of them were looking at like the political ramifications. I was like, but what were like the medical ramifications of that revolution? Because it was only like 100 years ago. Um, so I think always trying to connect what you're doing, whether it's research or not, back to medicine. And then I think just like emailing people is also helpful. This is the same way that you would email people asking for like shadowing opportunities if they have any openings in their labs, and also connecting with medical students, because now that I'm on this side of things, I think now I know some PIs that are looking for like undergrads to work in their lab over a summer or do like a small project with them. So I think networking is really, really important if it's not built into your curriculum, or if there's not like job postings that you see. But that's also why I really enjoyed the Reach Postback, is because we were getting paid for our research, and we were getting paired with a research lab that we were interested in. So it did a lot of the work for me.
I just wanted to add a couple more things, give my research spiel. So when I got to college, I didn't know that research was like a thing. Like I don't know, whatever. I also, I mean, wasn't even pre-med, but once I figured out, like through just being around other pre-meds, that research is a thing that you have to do, apparently, I was like, oh crap, okay. Well, so then I just sort of thought about, okay, like what are things that I really care about? And one of them was like global health. So I ended up applying to this global health program at Chicago. And then through that, I ended up working in a lab. And in that lab, I was doing a bunch of like bench work and like working with mice, which was not my vibe. Like I'm a very social person, and I'm not about just like sitting and like pipetting things. Like it was so boring to me. So after that I thought like, oh, like research just isn't for me. But then I did my MPH, so my master's in public health, and there's a huge, like research is a huge component. And I specialized in policy and also something called community health research. So community health research is exactly what it sounds like. You get to partner with a community, and if and work together to build a research, like to come up with a research question that's relevant to the community and build methods. You can also like teach your community partners how to analyze data and kind of frame it as like not just doing research, but like capacity building for your community partner. So that's been super cool, and I've been able to now I love research because um, I found this area of research that just like speaks to me, um, and my interests in health equity and also um, empowering um, empowering others, and also like I don't know. I'm all about like Robin Hooding, where you like take money from I like take money from Stanford and then I give it to these community partners for their like project or what that they want to do, and then we call it research, so Stanford keeps giving the money. Um, but my whole point in saying that is that my two big takeaways from that is that one, um, research isn't just like sitting in a lab. There's so much more to research. So if you feel like that's not really your thing, there's a lot more ways to do research. And two, it's super important to do something that you are actually passionate about. I think one of the things that a lot of pre-meds fall into is like checking off the boxes. Like, okay, I have to do research, so okay, you know, like no, like do things because you actually really care about it and it interests you, because that's how you're going to end up standing out in your applications. Like every single person applying is going to have research. Well, the majority of them are going to have research. Like, what's different about you? Um, and I think, especially if you come at it from like being low income or being a minority, like those are unique perspectives that you can work into your research, and are very needed in the research world. Um, there's something else I wanted to say, but then I forgot. Oh, actually, I remembered. Um, and also, like Katya said, um, I think just like contacting people and just like being around people really helps. Like if there's someone that you like meet or like see on Instagram or whatever, um, that you think like, oh, like what they do sounds kind of cool, just like message them, you know? Like maybe they won't answer, but maybe they will, and then you'll be able to learn a lot. So that's just my advice. That
Yeah,
is
in
all.
terms
Thank you.
of research, I think we have about 5 sessions that we've done on research, and we've brought some of the programs, the same one that I think Vanessa went to, and then also NIH. And so there's like 5 or 6 sessions that we've done on research, and some of them pay you like up to like $8,000 for 8 weeks. So during the summer, and it's open to community college, any undergraduate. So come and check those out. We have some of their videos up. You could go back and look. Um, but the information is out there. And the cool thing is now, I think lately, is there it's kind of been really frowned on uh, through the people that are funding research projects for having unpaid labor. That's kind of been like has become a pretty big issue. So most of the stuff they will try to do is they will pay you a little bit. Um, but so all I'm saying is that, if you need to put food in your stomach and roof over your head, like definitely utilize. But summer programs are a great way to look at them. The other question people are asking is about how did you guys all found shadowing? Certainly, if you're at a community college or undergraduate, how did you do the shadowing in the hospital or doctors? And you all want to add to that.
Let's see.
Um, so Stanford undergrad has like a program, it's called Sims, where they match you with somebody that you shadow, and a physician that you can shadow. And yeah, but I will say there was no program to my knowledge that was offered like that in community college. But what actually like worked for me is just random kind of like reaching out again and networking with people. I had once sold somebody something from Facebook Marketplace. And when I met with them to like exchange the item, she was a physician at Sutter Health and was like, "Oh, you're interested and you can come shadow me anytime." Which was, amazing. So there are opportunities out there. Like I know some people who had even asked like their primary care physician whether they could shadow them. There will be like a lot of paperwork for most places. But again, this is like another area where I would say to put yourself out there and ask, because a lot of times you'll be surprised how willing people are to help you and to have you shadow.
I would say sort of similar to Lexi, like I did a formal program, but there aren't too many. I think it just depends on your area. But one that I know that's like a national one is Atlantis. I don't know if it's still around, but I did Atlantis back in the day, and but it's in another country. So you choose what country you want to go to. I chose Greece, and I was with like a cohort of students, and we would all shadow together. And the reason I did that was because one, I really wanted to see Greece. And then two, because I felt like here I wasn't able to shadow all of the different specialties at once. Like I would have to email one physician, email another physician. Like there I was like one in the morning I was shadowing a surgeon, and in the afternoon I was shadowing an OBGYN. And I did that for 3 weeks. So I got like a good chunk of my shadowing there. I will say, I don't know if the VA offers shadowing everywhere, but I got to shadow at the VA here in Palo Alto, and I had an amazing physician, and I got to see a lot of the issues affecting veterans, and I felt like that was interesting to contrast it to the other shadowing I had seen with just like the general population. So I would say reach out to the people that you're interested in shadowing. If you're interested in, anesthesiology, just email as many anesthesiologists as you can and just see who says yes. I think like um, ask and you shall receive is very prevalent in medicine, and just not being shy. Like I think the culture I grew up in, we're taught to kind of not ask for things and to not necessarily like network because that's like you're seen as like you want something in exchange for something else, but it's actually just like growing the amount of people that you're having a friendship with, and a lot of people that want to see you succeed as well, and are your cheerleaders. So I think just reaching out and seeing, who takes the bait, who wants you to shadow them. Because a lot of the times the people that say yes are the people who really want you to learn. So like the first doctor I shadowed, I was in high school. I was like 17, but I had just reached out to him and said, I really want to learn about dermatology. And he said yes. And he, like when he was doing the surgeries, was actually telling me like, I'm using this tool because of this. I'm doing this because of this. So I think just don't be shy is my biggest advice for shadowing.
I just wanted to bring up that um so I didn't like do shadowing like how other people did it where you like go and you like follow a physician. Um for me, I don't I don't know guys. I'm very chaotic. So for me that just sounded boring. I was like I'm just gonna like stand and walk. So I decided to do like medical Spanish interpreting, and because of the way that was set up, I was with a doctor all day, like with a single doctor all day. So I was shadowing them, but also I was interpreting for patients at the same time. Um, so I used that as my shadowing hours or whatever. And no medical school like bat an eyelash. They were just like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So I just wanted to put that out there. I think the whole point of shadowing is just showing the medical school that like you have seen what what a doctor does, like you know what the doctor life is like, um, more than anything. So
Yeah, I like that you said that, Margarita. I think in a previous pre-med CC, we had the dean at the time speak with, like, come into this session with me, and she said that she remembered in my application I didn't have many hours or like clinical hours, but I had enough, and I was able to demonstrate that I knew what it meant to be a doctor, to become a doctor through the hours that I did do. My parents, as I said, we relied on a free clinic. And not only did we rely on them for our healthcare growing up, but we were also janitors for this community free clinic. So because of that, as I grew up, once I got to high school, I was volunteering at a library. I didn't know what I was going to do in high school. I was volunteering at a library, and because I grew up with this free clinic, I was able to do Spanish translations there too. And I continued to do that even through COVID. And then I Googled like a local hospital and their volunteering program. So ended up volunteering at one of the local hospitals just by Googling and applying and then meeting with them. And that was basically all my clinical. I did also do like some teach nutrition teaching in a clinical setting, but again, not many hours. There's no hour requirement for med school. There is for PA school, but not for med school. But it was enough to show that I knew what it meant to become a doctor.
Anyone else? Anyone? The only thing that I would add is we did a bunch of workshops on, and I put a link in one of them, is how to do in clinical and shadowing experience. And I think one of the hardest things getting into a hospital or a setting is getting that badge. That means like getting your TB screening and stuff like that. So it's not like healthcare is a heavily regulated industry in the US. It's probably the most regulated. So you can't just get off the street and walk into a hospital. Now, some doctors in smaller clinics and stuff, they may circumvent that stuff, but there's like a lot of rules and things that you have to do that. And so your local hospital is a great place to start. Some of the summer programs are actually like baking in shadowing into them. So I know like the Stanford uh, summer program has that Margarita runs that. And we'll have Miss Anthony is going to come and talk about that as well in a couple of weeks. Actually, she usually comes in January. And then also part of it too, there's certain things you could do. Like if you're interested in women's health, like doulas are a really big thing. And now a lot of hospitals are training doulas that are uh, culturally from certain, from those cultures and also speak, those languages. And so I know like there's a doula program at Washington Hospital in Fremont, people that could speak Urdu and Dari and stuff. So if like tapping into your community is a huge thing. Like Vanessa and Margarita, definitely use their Spanish skills, but you don't have to, there's a lot of communities that are represented in California, but also across the country to tap into that as well and using your skills. Because I think the most important thing is with shadowing is you just need to get that badge, certainly in a big hospital setting. Um, like, even as an employee, you like if you don't do your TB screen, they'll like you can't clock in. So, um, other question some people are asking about um the people are asking about leadership and leadership experience. And can you all talk a little bit about that? And how did you find those leadership experiences and what you did?
I would say a lot of my leadership experience was from undergrad. And I think maybe that's like a common theme, but I was involved in like student government in undergrad, and just different like clubs. I guess the one that stands out to me the most with leadership, and I think that is a really important thing when you're applying to medical school, because in a lot of ways you're going to have to continue being a leader throughout your medical journey, even as a physician, kind of like leading a team. So they want to see that you have leadership and the ability, to lead and also work in a team. Um, is I founded an undergraduate chapter of the Latino Medical Student Association at Princeton. So LMSA is like at every single medical school in the country, but they had started doing undergraduate chapters when I was in undergrad. And so I started a chapter there my senior year. And I was, the co-founder and president. And so I was able, I don't know why I did air quotes, but I was the co-founder and president of that club. And so I got to like put on all of these really cool events, and I love talking about it in my application and in my interviews because it was like we got to go to an art museum that had to do with like health, and so we collaborated with another pre-med club. I think it was the Black Pre-Medical Society at Princeton, and go to this like art exhibit and just see how art is represent or medicine is represented through art and what we can learn from that. And then we also collaborated with an investment club at Princeton because my point was like, if we're underrepresented minorities and we're first gen, a lot of us, and we're going to become doctors and we're going to be making a decent amount of money. We need to learn how to invest. And so, like, invest that money. And so we partnered with this club and they just came and like talked to us about how to invest. We also had alum that were from Princeton that were physicians come and talk to us. And I was like coordinating all of this. And it was just so much fun. And so I feel like if you're going to take on leadership positions, do something that you really enjoy doing and really enjoy talking about and enjoy like leading a group. Because it was a lot of work, but it was so much fun. And so I think some of the other leadership positions I had were much more serious. They weren't as fun. So I just feel like my advice would be choose like leadership positions that you'd really enjoy talking about while you're on the application cycle. And then that leadership position is why I ended up becoming an officer at Stanford's LMSA before I was even a med student because there was just not enough people to be officers in LMSA at the time. And so since I was a Reach Scholar, Margarita knows this and Vanessa too, I ended up serving as an officer. So I think that leadership does pay off.
Um, I think it's easy to feel like these are all separate categories or boxes that you're trying to check, right? Like what Margarita was saying, don't just do leadership opportunities because you're trying to do a leadership opportunity to put on your application. Like you can be a leader, starting a club or being the president is like fabulous, amazing, and especially if it's authentic to what your interests are and your passions are, like what Katya said. But I just want to like really remind everyone that these things aren't, you're not just doing them to do them. And you can be a leader anywhere. If you're leading a research project, you are a leader. If you decide to, lead a team to, I don't know, X, Y, and Z, you're a leader. Like there's so many ways to demonstrate leadership and to write about, the way that you are displaying leadership qualities without having like a formal club, leadership position. So, look around for gaps in ways that you can be a leader within whatever you're doing or whatever you want to do.
Yeah, you're probably already a leader. I mean, like if you're gathering your family together to talk about a certain topic, if you're just volunteering at a library or something, and you took lead in like, let's organize this certain way. I saw this little gap. You're a leader there. So y'all are probably already leaders. Twist the question around and figure that out. How are you already leading?
And I just,
Yeah.
oh,
Oh
sorry.
God. No, no, no.
I, I just wanted to super duper duper emphasize once again, um, I'm literally that Bernie Sanders meme that's like, I am once again asking you, I'm once again saying that just do things that you like. Like when you're genuinely passionate about someone, you're gonna end up being a leader. You're gonna end up being a leader in that. So, and that's something that comes across in applications and interviews. Like I've worked on the admissions committee and I can tell when someone did X, Y, Z because they just wanted to like put it on their resume as opposed to people who are like, yeah. One time there was this kid who was very passionate about uh model trains and he was like the he like made a club about model trains and somehow this related to health. I actually don't remember how, but I remember just how excited he was about it. And I was just like, and everyone else who interviewed with him was like, whoa, like we like this guy, because he was just so excited about it. And he ended up getting into Stanford. He's one of our classmates. So, um, yeah, just do things you like. Just vibe. Live your best life.
And just one more thing, I feel like I'm very passionate about this point too. Like just like the idea of like doing things because you should do them rather than you actually feel like you want to do them and that you're passionate about them is like you can, be the president of a club and talk about it in your application, but when it comes time to do the interviews, if you don't have that like if you didn't actually really learn anything, if you don't have anything to talk about, if you're not passionate about what you were doing, then that will shine through. So don't just do things to be on paper or to write something down. Like actually really try and be, reflective about what it is you want to achieve in terms of like whatever you're writing about and what you learned and how you're going to apply it later on in your career.
Yeah, so I would just say Google the different types of leadership because I think there's 26 different ones. There's like the transformational, visionary, leadership is not just being the president of something or standing in front. You could do a lot of leadership things in background. And so I could just say like one of our most important leaders for our organization is the person that does all the data, you know, and and God bless their soul, the people that do that because they're very detail oriented. But not everyone is charismatic to stand in front of front of a room and and have, um, have everybody, eating out of the palm of their hand. There's various types of leadership. And I think just for us is like when we recruit new leaders and what Lexi was saying is that you don't need to be an expert. Like people that are on medical school admission committees, um, they're experts. They read thousands of applications and they have, so they could pick up the BS pretty easily. But I could just say for us is you could just tell. Like you do it you do it a couple of times, you can tell, okay, this person is really passionate about it, or even in an interview. So like what did you do? And if you were the president of a pre-med club and said, "Oh yes, we would gather once a month and we would commiserate about our organic chemistry class," that's not leadership, but but a leadership could be like, "Hey, we found that we needed this, I don't know, lab manual and it wasn't available, so we figured out how to replicate it," or those types of being able to answer a problem. And I think and I think like I think it was and so being able to answer those questions. So I think like, you know, like Katya is very, just knowing her, she's very uh organizationally and and very good at like getting people together, and some people just don't have that skill. And so instead of like trying to replicate somebody else's doing, do what, and everybody has some sort of talent, you know. But yeah. And somebody asked, like, like I know, like there's things you could do, even like, what is those crisis? What is that number? What is that thing called? Crisis line? There's like a crisis text number that you could do, and they train volunteers to do that. So there's a lot of things you could do in terms of volunteering and leadership. Um, the other question somebody asked is, what do you do if you get a C in a class and you pre-med? are you considered not pre-med anymore? And then if if you get a C in your science class.
I don't even know how many C's I got. Like I I got a few C's and then I dropped I think like molecular bio and organic chemistry at Princeton. So if that means I'm not pre-med, I don't know what I'm doing. But I just want to put that out there. Like it was really hard on my like confidence, but I just kept going. Like, don't let that deter you. There's a lot of people in medical school that got C's, maybe even D's in their pre-med classes, and they're here. The difference between the people who aren't is just their perseverance, their determination. Like, if this really is your calling, don't let a C stop you. Just keep going. Retake the class, take an upper division science class, and show that you can do the work. I think having that upward trend is really important. It started, like Drake, we started from the bottom, now we're here, right? Like C's to MDs, okay? So just show that you can improve that grade that you got is my advice.
Um, Anyone else? Anyone else wants to add um to that in terms of like how to overcome? Um,
I would say, um, I know I personally didn't have this, but I know of people that did or do, and they wrote about it in their application a little bit. So there's like a box that you can write about. I don't remember what it's called, but it's like a little bit extra word count you can write about in your primary application. And what I would recommend, again, that upward trend is important. I'm not gonna like lie. That is probably something that you want to make sure that you can demonstrate. But for those boxes, like write about what you learned, what was going on in your life, what like changes did you make to overcome that. I think like a big thing is being introspective and reflective enough to like actually get to the meat of why, you know, that didn't happen anymore, what you learned from that experience.
this is another big topic is how do you overcome imposter syndrome? Which we've done like entire sessions on this, but I'll let y'all.
Answer this. So I don't know how you overcome it because I still experience it. Like, yeah. But how I've managed it, um, and I've basically been experiencing imposter syndrome since like my first year of college when I got there and I like first of all I realized that I didn't even actually speak English. Like I spoke Spanglish. Um, I just hadn't realized because everyone around me spoke Spanish, so they knew what I was saying when I like flipped from one language to another. But anyway, I just and there were these people saying like these huge words that I kid you not, I literally had no idea what they were saying. I would write it down and then like look it up on Google, like what does this word mean, you know? Um, but regarding that experience, one time I think um I was like writing down a word because I was just like I don't know what that word means. It was like in a very small class. And someone next to me, like during our little break, saw that I was writing it down and they were like, "Oh, I also don't know what that means." And then that's when I'm like, "Hold up. there must be other people here that don't know what it means. Like if this person who I thought like had everything together and like knew exactly what was going on said that they didn't know, then like other people probably don't know, maybe. So I was just like, you know what? Next time someone says a word I don't understand, I'm just gonna raise my hand and be like, what does that word mean? And I did, and I kid you not, like at least five people came up to me and thanked me for doing that. My whole point in saying that is that I feel like people think you think that other people have it together, have it figured out, but they don't. None of us know what we're doing. We're just living life, you know? Like no one actually knows what they're doing. So I think remembering that has helped me a lot, and also really doing a lot of self-reflection around like what I bring to the table. Like, sure, I may not have some of the experiences that these people have. Like some of my classmates were making like apps in middle school. Um, or not in middle school, because
High
apps were
school.
high school. Um, I just aged myself, didn't I? Anyway, um, and I'm like, wow, like I'm nothing in comparison to that. But it's like, no, I have so much lived experience and so many other things that make me that help me connect to my patients, that help me yeah, connect with my patients, connect with others that my classmates don't have. I have a lot that brings to the table. So I think just being very aware of who you are and the strengths that you have and just very much focusing on that.
Anyone else?
Um, agree with everything Margarita said. Like, let me know if anyone has figured out how to overcome imposter syndrome fully. I think the fact that this is such a um like hot topic in all kind of domains in academia and medicine, everything, it's like if we all feel like imposters are something that is I don't know, helpful about knowing that. And it also makes you think like, oh, maybe if we're all imposters, it's not like me or us, it's the environment that we're in. So I think if you're feeling that way, it's also kind of your job to like try and make that environment a little bit more hospitable. And what does that look like? Well, like if you don't have it all together, it's okay that to say that you don't have it all together. I think that's a big thing. Like when it feels like you're the only one that's internally struggling, that's when it hurts the most. So, like, don't be afraid to be vulnerable and say, oh, like, I can't handle this, or I feel like I'm being an imposter. I feel like I don't belong. Like, I think you'll be surprised at the amount of people that are willing to talk about it um and hopefully that like contributes to making imposter syndrome less of a epidemic, I suppose.
So it's almost 11, it's 11:33 and I'm gonna let y'all go and I also have to get to sleep. So because I was up all night. Um but one last question is if you would give yourself advice in your pre-med journey, what would it be or what would you do differently? What would be that advice?
I could go first. Because I definitely know what I would do. I So, as I said before, I'm like first generation, grew up low income. So I was, and also my teachers in high school were like, and my teachers were just not the best. I had some great teachers, like a handful, but the rest of them just like literally didn't care. I don't think one of my teachers, I never saw him stand up and like write something on a board, like ever. My whole point in saying that is that I was very used to just like teaching myself, doing things myself, taking care of things myself, and I was always praised for that, for being so independent. So that kind of just reinforced this idea that I have to be independent, do things on my own, have to figure things out on my own. Um, and it took me a really long time to break that down and become okay with asking for help. With being vulnerable, like what Lexi was saying, and asking for help. And I feel like I could have saved myself so much trouble, so much stress. I could have been better prepared for situations had I just really reached out to others and asked not even for explicitly help, but ask for advice. Um, it's okay to not do things completely on your own. We're social beings, so that's my advice. Don't be afraid to just come up to people and talk to them.
I would say when I first, and this ties back with imposter syndrome, but when I first started pursuing my academics and medicine, I felt like I needed to like hide some of my identities just because I didn't share them with a lot of the people around me. And over time, what I learned and what I think like, you know, I ended up being more of my authentic self was to actually like leverage those identities to, you know, like, I'm Native. I wanted to work on Native health initiatives, right? And like when I'm working with Native patients, we have a different dynamic than when a non-Native person is. So figure out what makes you and your identities unique, and then use that as like your superpower to find gaps and try to alleviate them, is what I would say.
I guess I can go next. I feel like I would tell myself so many things, so it's hard to just choose one. But I think I would just say don't be so hard on yourself because I think like I felt the calling to be a doctor when I was 17. I'm 26 now and I just started medical school. And I think being, like I said, always a nerd, like always a high achiever, I put a lot of pressure on myself. I didn't really have that from my family, which I was very lucky because I know other people did, but I placed a lot of pressure on myself. Like, you're going to do 4 years of undergrad, then you're going to go straight to medical school, then you're going to match, right? I had like this idea of what my life was going to be like. And of course, it never goes that way. And I would compare myself a lot to my peers who, were going straight to Harvard after undergrad or had gotten like this amazing scholarship and just spoke the language of academia. It's kind of like Margarita mentioned. I remember like during orientation, somebody asked a question and I had no idea what she said. Like I just don't remember. And like not that I don't remember, I didn't understand. So I think if you're first gen, especially, don't be so hard on yourself because academia, medical school, this medical journey, it's like its own language, like its own culture. And I feel like if you weren't brought up in that, it's really hard to like assimilate, and you shouldn't necessarily have to. You're bringing something super unique that other students aren't. Like, I'll sit in class and we'll be talking about something, and I'll be like, I could teach this class. Like, I don't need, because like it'll be on a topic that I've been through myself. Maybe, obviously, not like anatomy or biochemistry. I'm talking about stuff where we're talking about like population health, or even when we're interacting with patients, like you start to see like qualities that weren't appreciated when you were in undergrad or going through the pre-med cycle. Like now they're starting to come out because you realize like those are actually your superpowers. So I would just say don't be so hard on yourself. I think if you need to take gap years, take them. Like they really build so much character and really build your like I don't know. I always think of like a file cabinet of experiences. Like I have a lot of things in there that like maybe some good, some bad, but there's a lot to go back on that I can like relate to people that other people can't. So I think just knowing that those are your superpowers and to not be hard on yourself, just do you.
Uh, I love Margarita. Margarita, she's also a reason why I'm here at Stanford. And I also really liked her response. So I will echo that. And that grew up super hyper independent. Wait, how do you do that? And did not want to like, and just like asking for things is not something I grew up doing. So ask for things, get the help that you need. Um, yeah, just echoing what Margarita said.
All righty. Well, ladies, thank you again for making yourselves available on a Saturday morning. I'm sure you all had other things to do, like studying and relaxing. So thank you again for coming. And thanks everyone for joining us. And hopefully we'll see you at another session.